Hey everybody, Omar here, your Edge of South Africa guy, and I am back with another fun-filled video. And I thought I'd just do uh, another video here for you. Took me a while to set up so you guys can see all the knives I have in frame. Um, as you guys know, I have a large South African knife collection, and I've got 40. I'm sorry, I think I have about 50 of these now. Looking at, I just counted them all. I've got like 50 South African knives, and going all the way back to like 2017. And I was just thinking about, most knife collectors. Uh, we usually get bored with our knives, and then we sell them off, and get better knives because we've grown as collectors. But what's interesting is that we tend to forget that in this hobby, we're actually learning and growing as we go. And it shows in our collection. And I'm going to demonstrate that in this video. Because what happens is, your knowledge grows, and then you see something new, and then your collection starts to go more into that direction. But with each knife that you buy, you're gaining knowledge about your hobby. Usually it's about the materials or the knife itself. Maybe you discovered a new knife maker. It's always something where it's elevated to the next level. And so I just wanted to show these knives to all of you and show you what happened to me when I started collecting and how I grew bit by bit. Because each one of these knives will explain why my knife collecting, I guess in a sense, for myself personally, got better and better, in many cases much more extravagant, a little bit more wild, a little crazy. So I'm just going to go through this. So I got my very first custom, South African custom knife in 2017. I walked into the Blade Gallery, and keep in mind, I've never bought an incredibly high-end knife. You're talking about someone who's just left the production world, buying knives that are anywhere from like 150 to maybe as high as 300 if it were like a limited edition, right? So one day I walk into the Blade Gallery, and I'm seeing all these beautiful knives. I know absolutely nothing about custom knives, nothing. I just go by eye, and the first knife I got was this. This knife is by John Arnold. This was my very first high-end custom knife. This one cost me right around I believe it cost me about $650. And me not knowing anything about materials or the way knives are put together, or the fact that these are all, made by hand, and some of them are one of a kind. For this first piece, I got really lucky. This really was a one of a kind, but I didn't understand what that meant at that time. So here I have my very first custom knife. I'm just going only by eye. So basically, I saw this knife, and I said, "Wow, I didn't know they ever had black wood before." And they said, "That's not black wood. That's actually G10." So here's my first introduction to my first material that I'm understanding. G10. I began to realize, well, what is G10? Well, G10 was a material that is, that they put on knives, that's very, very flexible for color, and for style. I mean, real easy to just use this as filler. And then I found out that these inlays in here were wood. And then I began to realize, well, how did they get the inlays in there? I didn't understand anything, and this became pretty much my first custom knife. But as time went on, I got lucky in the sense that I didn't buy any more G10 after this, because I realized that G10 was an inorganic material, but it wasn't really a material that was, I guess, I don't know how to put this, a high end inorganic material. It was just a filler material. and material that they can color and that they can do anything with. So I said to myself, okay, no more G10, or we won't have as much G10. So I put G10 on the back of my mind and walked in again, got my second custom. Now, mind you, I go from G10 to going to this knife, which when I got it, I thought it was G10, and then I was told it was micarta. But the material micarta was a little bit, I guess you could say, of a higher class than G10, because now we're dealing with an inorganic material that's not necessarily seen as, I don't want to say low class or anything like G10, where the knife maker can pretty much do anything he wants to do to the knife to make the knife look pretty. But now we've got sort of a much more, I guess, higher class of material in micarta, which is just as sturdy as G10, but it's one that's considered a higher end material. So now I'm learning all about micarta as far as the materials go. Now, time goes on again, and I move on, and I discover my very first carbon fiber knife. And then I realized that it's not really all carbon fiber. It's carbon fiber with a mixture of G10 in it. I said, oh, wow, I didn't know they could do that. And I found out that it was G10 underneath with a layer of carbon fiber on top of it, I guess, to give it more strength or to make it last longer. Because one thing I learned about G10 is that it's practically an indestructible material, pretty much, and it's very, very flexible for knife makers to use in their customs to make the knife look pretty. And to be honest, I began to realize that G10 really doesn't get all of the credit that it deserves, because G10 being a very flexible material, but it's up to the knife maker to do what he possibly can to make the material look like it's a high-class material. And, but for collectors, we're in it for the authenticity. We're in it for, I get, in a sense, we don't even realize, but we're in it for the growth and want to learn. So time goes on again. So now you guys can see that I'm evolving a little bit, right? Going from G10 to, Ambonia wood burl inlays. First time I ever learned about inlays. Then I go into micarta, a new material I've learned. And then finally, carbon fiber in G10. Now we move on to another phase of my knife collecting, where I'm learning about even more newer material. So in this case, we have the Cosi Steenkamp Samsung flipper, and this is the first time I'd ever seen a knife with like a two-tone or two materials on a knife. I'd never seen that. In other words, two really good high-class materials. Not in the case with this knife over here, which is G10 and Ambonia wood burl. But now we've got two really great combination of materials on one knife that are incredibly strong and sturdy. We've got the red carbon fiber, and then we've got the white Westinghouse. And this is the first time I ever learned about white Westinghouse. White Westinghouse is actually old refrigerator material, roughly about 100 years old as far as I understand it. In South Africa, they discovered an old burned down warehouse that had a bunch of refrigerators in it, and they realized that this material here, which comes from inside of a refrigerator, was very, very indestructible, just as indestructible, but much prettier looking than G10. And this material actually, and this is what's interesting, is that white Westinghouse is just refrigerator material, right? But it gets better credit as far as class of material than G10, and yet G10 is just as good of a material as white Westinghouse. However, I think what made this material, from what I can understand it, what made this material so sought after was the fact that it was rare. Because G10 you can find anywhere, and a knife maker, if he has it, they can just use that material and do anything with it. Whereas white Westinghouse was a lot more rarer, so it costs more. And then, of course, it was also the first time I'd ever realized that you can actually have two different materials on one knife, and yet when I ran my fingers through it, it felt like it was all just one piece because you run your finger through the two different materials, carbon fiber and white Westinghouse, and you don't feel this line here. You don't feel where, they freaking, you know, you just don't. It was incredibly sanded down so well that the two materials just blend together, giving it just one feel. And, of course, obviously, you've got now the backspacer with carbon fiber on it. So now, as a knife collector, I'm beginning to learn that, I can have combination of materials on one knife. Whereas before, as you guys can see, this knife here I got by luck. It had like two materials in it, but my next two, which I went with, didn't have, this the Ambonia wood burl and a different material on it. It was just all one material because I'm still buying by eye now at this point. But now I've learned about these materials that are here, and now I take these materials and my knowledge of these materials and bring it to my next possible knife buy, and that's how I got to this knife. So, moving on, I'm beginning to grow again because now I go back to the blade gallery and I check this guy out, man. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I'd never seen a knife that had such brilliant texture and feel to it that, I was practically, moved by that. Looking at the knife now as all the knowledge that I have, I'm kind of sorry that I got this one because the backspacer's G10. And I would have been much more happier if it were carbon fiber, but I didn't realize that. I didn't see that then. You know what I mean? So this is another part of my growth as a knife collector. So on this knife, I learned about engraving, which is this stuff here. I just saw this and I thought, wow, this is really wild. And it was a new material that I learned. Again, zirconium. Zirconium is another flexible material that I had to learn. I mean, the stuff looks like glass. It's just incredibly beautiful. We began to realize that, this was very, very flexible material. It looks like jewelry. I'm like, man, this stuff is just really pretty. And the engraving was absolutely hot. And then to combine it with the marble carbon fiber, this is how the hobby goes. I never would have bought this one as my first knife, or if I did buy it as my first knife, it would have been luck, but I wouldn't have learned anything at that point. You know what I mean? And so with this knife, with the engraving and then the marble carbon fiber, and I thought, man, I was actually expecting all my knives to have like a ton of engraving on them, right? That's all my next few knives are going to be is engraving. Well, as it turns out, my next knife was an engraving knife. And now I'm really growing as a knife collector because I learned that you can actually have a knife made for you by the knife maker, and given that special attention, whoa, man, that was like a whole other experience again for me as a knife collector. I didn't know that you could have a knife made for you, and that became this one. And this one is never leaving me. And this is also a very, very significant knife. Let me wipe that off a little bit, man. So this is a much more significant knife to me because this is the very first knife that I ever got that was custom, that was made for me by Andre Thorburn. And I actually met, spoke with the knife maker, and I told him what I wanted, and he came up with this beauty. I was just completely blown away. Now we go from regular engraving, like this, over to now one with a picture of an eagle on it. And this is definitely one of my all-time favorite customs in my collection. It's never going anywhere. It's a fantastic masterpiece. We've got an eagle on both sides of the knife, and then white Westinghouse. Now, what makes this knife so beautiful, the white Westinghouse looks like the beak of an eagle. So it looks like an eagle basically slammed right onto my knife. It's like Andre grabbed a bird out of the sky and ripped his beak off and put it on my knife. And I just thought that was fantastic. Really, really super, super stuff. So moving on, I thought, well, let me get a hand in maybe having a little bit more say in my knife, because I just told Andre that I wanted to have some sort of an animal of engraving on it, but I didn't design this knife to my liking. He did this himself. He created this design with the actual, the eagle on it, and then choosing this particular White Westinghouse scale to go with the eagle, and I thought it was perfect. And so I thought, gee, I wonder if I can design my own knife and just ask a knife maker to make it for me. So now we get on to this one by John Arnold. So I'm a Filipino, and we don't really have any symbolisms in the Philippines, at least nothing that I could, you know, hold close to. But I thought it'd be kind of cool to have a knife that was sort of an Asian flair to it. And so I actually took this knife and I drew like a little yin yang on a piece of paper, and I took a shot of it and gave it to John Arnold, and I said, this is what I want. And I said, is it any way that you can make the screws look different, one here and one there? And he did the gold on the White Westinghouse, and then the dark on the, the blue on the zirconium there. And he gave me like a yin yang knife. And so now I've got something that I kind of had a hand in designing. And I even chose the materials, which I had never done before, right? So I chose the White Westinghouse, which was my favorite. Obviously, I visited White Westinghouse before on these two knives, and I knew all about it. I also knew by this time that White Westinghouse could be aged. And I told him I want to get the whitest White Westinghouse you can find for this knife and have it go with the zirconium. And we came up with the beauty here with my Mufata by John Arnold, and he designed this one or he made this one for me. And, I just kind of, went along with it and began to start understanding more. But you have to understand, it's a process. There's no way I would have been able to have anything to do with the creation of this knife if I didn't go through this process here, moving into this process here, gaining all the knowledge and learning all knowledge from here to here, and now I get to this, where now I'm not really like an expert at, being a knife collector, but I know quite a bit about knife materials at this point. So, and really that's what this video is about. It's about the journey of being a knife collector. And a lot of us, the reason why I'm doing this video is because a lot of us don't realize what happens to you when you do this kind of knife collecting, that you're actually learning, that you're actually growing, and you're taking all this knowledge with you. A lot of us that own 50, 60, 70 knives, right? We carry these knives on a daily basis. Sometimes we forget that they're in our case, and we don't carry them, or we get bored with them, and we sell them off. We sell them off, but then you don't realize, wait a minute, I don't have record of everything that I've learned as a knife collector. Do I really want to sell off all of my knives and start fresh with a whole new batch with all the knowledge that I know now? It kind of makes sense to do that, but keeping your knife collection the way it is, for the most part, I'm saying you don't have to sell all of your knives, right? You can sell some that you really don't like. I mean, like, I would be perfectly happy if I sold this one, but actually I won't, because Willem Steenkamp doesn't make these flippers all that often, so it's going to wind up staying in my collection. But, you know what I mean? You want to show the growth. You want to have proof that you know about these things, because you were learning as you went along. So, hold on, I'm going to take a little drink of water here. So here I had, I actually had a hand in the making of my knife. This is the first time I ever gave an actual blueprint to a knife maker to help make a knife. Usually I just say, well, I want something blue, I want something black, and they just make me something nice. And then I tell them what materials I want based on the stuff that I bought in the past. So there's a good chance, you know what I'm saying? You're not going to see an exotic material on this knife, because I don't know about that material yet. But I did know about zirconium, and I did know about White Westinghouse at this point. So now I was moving into another type of knife. And and it's kind of funny that I didn't even catch this one on until much later. And I'm kind of sorry I didn't, because I'm kind of sorry that I didn't, and I'm kind of sorry that I did, in a sense that if I discovered a knife like this, which I'm going to pull out here in a second, I probably would have completely broke my bank buying knives like this. But in any case, this is the LL15 by Eureka Blumeris. This was the first time I ever purchased uh, a full dress piece, which I didn't even know what that was. I was like, what's a full, what is that? What's a full dress piece? And they explained to me a full dress piece is a knife that has art on every part of the knife. There is not one part on this knife that has no art on it at all. From the blade to the bolster to the handles to the liners, there's art there. The back spacer has art there. Even the pocket clip, which is all in titanium blue, which is considered an art, and then the mercury ball. I was blown away. And for this knife, guys, for this knife, I stayed at the Blade Gallery for roughly an hour trying to decide if I should buy it, because this knife cost me $1,200 for this guy. All right, $1,200, but it was so unique because I just had to have it. I loved blue. I didn't even know what this material was. I found out it was called Damascus, and what made me buy it was the fact that it was brilliant blue and not purple. You guys can see that? Even in different lights, it stays blue. Usually Damascus will wind up like being purple, or it'll lose its color. But this particular Damascus, I just got blown away, and I just fell in love with the color of it, and I had to have it. And the marble carbon fiber was so brilliant on it. You know what I mean? It's got that shimmering look to it. I was like, I have to have this. And of course, the blade was gorgeous with that, Dama steel, which is another type of blade I never learned before. Dama steel, that's something new again that I wanted to know about. And yeah, this one was a struggle for me to buy. And in the end, I decided, well, you know what? I love it. I'm buying it. I bought it. I'm happy with it. So yeah, so for this one, yeah, I definitely had to get that because I'd never seen a knife with so much stuff on it. So again, I'm growing my very first full dress piece, right? So this is how you begin to. This is one of the main reasons why custom knife collecting is incredibly expensive, but really just a lot of fun because you get to see so many different kinds of materials on it and so many different types of knives that are being made, and the way knives are made. For my next knife, my final knife in this video, and I guess you could say that this particular knife, in this series anyway, would show my final growth. Again, I got another full dress piece on it with the Damascus blade on there. You know, kind of going off with this one because I just wanted to get another full dress, and I got this one ball release by Des Horn. If you guys may have heard of Des Horn, he's got only one, I believe it's one discontinued Spyderco knife called the Des Horn, and it's in Cocobolo wood. Probably buy one on eBay. It's like freaking $400 now, but don't buy it. But anyway, that knife, the Des Horn knife, that Spyderco, that he went in with Spyderco, basically put Des Horn on the map and made him, the face of South African knife makers, because this guy's a legendary knife maker. He is actually way before even Andre Thorburn. He's like one of the grandfathers of custom knife making, and he just. Yeah, he was just a guy that I definitely had to have in my collection. The growth on this knife, more than likely, was the zirconium here. Even though I'd seen zirconium on this knife and knew about zirconium on this knife, I didn't know that it could be fashioned in this manner with the pivots and the little like dots. You could actually shape it to that manner. I didn't know that. I thought you would just get it as just one full flat piece. Because if I'd known this, that the material could be altered in a way, I probably would have had that done on this knife, right? But that doesn't, that wouldn't explain, how I grew as a knife maker. So Yeah, so for this one, again, another full dress piece. We've got, you can barely see it, but it's got Dama steel backspacer on it. Again, the file work is very, very intricate, even more intricate than Arucas Blumeris' file work, and even more than Andre Thorburns. He just does made by hand on a completely different level than the other guys. Death's Horn's knives actually almost all look like this. They all look like jewelry. You know, that's just. And if you're an art knife collector like myself, Death's Horn is usually pretty easy to gravitate to. You go for the pretty stuff, and that was just something that I this one I just had to have. Plus, his this is also the first time I realized that knife makers like Death's Horn, like these little teeny tiny screws on my knife, they look like jewelry. They're custom made. Not only are these little pivots and this pivot here custom made, the tools that make these pivots are custom made. So there's a special tool made by the knife maker to make these little screws on the knife. That was another thing that I learned, that made by hand knives are done pretty extreme. I mean, if you're, and there's no way that this knife could be duplicated by anybody else. This is a full-on Death's Horn piece, and no one in the world will be able to recreate it, ever. Because they don't have the tools to create these screws. They probably don't have his finesse work on the file work down there to make the knife look like that. They just don't have those skills. So each knife looks like it's a painting. And for me, as a knife collector, to go from here to here, I mean, that says something, So now when you put all these knives together in one collection, you're getting a pretty good idea of who you are as a knife collector. And that's what this video is about. To sell off all your knives because you reached a certain point in your knife collecting where, wow, I got to have all my knives look like this, so I'm going to sell off all my other knives and start over from scratch. I think that's criminal as a collector. It's just my own opinion, because I want to show how I grew as a knife collector. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to sell any of the knives on the table. I'll probably wind up selling some, but I still want to have some knives in my collection that shows who I am as a collector, and that shows all the knowledge that I've acquired as a collector. Because, to be honest, to go from I didn't know anything and I just bought this knife because it looked good, to look at all the stuff that I know now, I mean, that's priceless, That knowledge is priceless. That learning is priceless. And now I can pretty much can't wait to find out what's the next knife with a new piece of material or something new on it. Is it going to be a new steel that I never heard of? Is it going to be a new material I never heard of? Is it going to be some new innovative way that knife makers make action on a knife? I don't know. But when you're a collector, you want your collection to represent that you're a collector. And you want it to represent you as a collector. And you want it to show how you grew as a knife collector. Because you can show anyone who knows nothing about knives, just hand them one of your knives and they're going to go, wow, this is really pretty. Now you can talk with them and teach them all the stuff that you learned. Something to think about, right, guys? If you're going to get into knife collecting. So for all those knife collectors out there that are like me, that have kind of like going, you know what, I'm kind of bored with my collection. I'm really not interested in half the knives I have again. Think again, because they're showing you growth as you go along. And that's how you get such a pretty collection. Think about that for a little bit. And I will see you guys in my next video. This one was kind of fun. I thought this one had some sort of a theme to it, whereas on my other videos, I'm just rambling because I feel like I want to do a video, but I have no idea what the hell I'm going to talk about. But this one was kind of fun. So I hope this one gets just as many hits because I think you guys probably learned something from this little video here. Thank you so much for watching. This is Omar, your Edge of South Africa guy, giving you the best and the brightest of South African knives. I will see you all in my next video. Have a good evening.